Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I am your host, the Football Grump, and with me, as always, is Mike the Cranky Fan. We are back for round 2 of Giants versus Commanders, this time in Washington on Sunday night under the bright lights that NBC provides and all of the fun graphics and dumb theme songs. Are you ready? This is the most important game of the year, isn't it?
Grump, do you see this stubble here? And don't comment that it's white because I'm getting old.
I'm right there with you, man.
This is a playoff beard because this is a de facto playoff game.
That's true, and I am looking much bushier and more playoffy than you are.
Well,
I've been anticipating this this playoff game for, let's see, I want to say since the beginning of October this has been growing. So,
wow.
Yeah. This is the most important game of the entire year.
I'm sure the football Grumpette really appreciates your
my,
follicle situation.
my dedication to the game. I think so. This is not going to be a super long episode, partially because this is a rematch of only 2 weeks ago. So not much has changed from a game-to-game matchup standpoint. But also, I'm sick. I have a fever. And I woke up this morning from a fever dream that I was at FedEx Field with an obstructed view seat. Not joking. I was behind a pillar of some kind. And Gary Brightwell took the opening kickoff to the house. And it was not even like, it was like the Red Seas parted. I'm going to try and channel that sickness energy into real life.
Remember when we were kids and we would dream about girls? So now you're dreaming about kickoff returns.
I think when you're sick, you just don't dream normal.
You just have that same crazy dream, and it's like you wake up and you go right back into the dream.
Oh, yeah.
That's my fever dream craziness. It's like you're in this intense dream that you know is a dream, and then you wake up and you just kind of go, it's like hitting pause and going to the bathroom and coming back and hitting play again. That's what it feels like.
I think what it is you don't really wake all the way up. Like, I think like a portion of your brain is still dormant. Regardless, my brain is mostly dormant anyway. So this is an important game. Like I said, this is de facto playoff game. This is the most important game of the year, however you want to phrase it. And I think that some narratives, to me, that's storyline enough. I mean, the entire Giants season, their 7-win start or whatever, it all comes down to this game. To me, that is enough of a storyline. But for journalists, it's apparently not. So because Daniel Jones's contract is up at the end of the year, we have to also decide if this game determines the future of Daniel Jones. Do you think that this in any way really affects the way Daniel Jones is perceived?
Nope, not one bit. I mean, it's one data point out of 17 this year, out of 50-something in the past 5 years. No. I mean, first of all, it's not fair to him because, again, it's hard to, and we've been saying this all year, it's impossible to evaluate without having competent weapons around you and a competent offensive line. But that's fine. I mean, that's the way it has been this year. You have to do something. But to put one particular game on that, I mean, we said it in one of the games a couple weeks ago that we're talking about his stats, and it was something like, and I don't remember the exact numbers, like 18 for 35 for 203. And I said, well, what if that one catch wasn't dropped? All of a sudden it's 19 for 36 for 247. Do you feel differently? So when you have it in one game and you're kind of thinking about numbers and performance, it's incredibly unfair. And it's something that I don't think anybody with any importance in the front office is saying, this is the game. This isn't some bad movie we're watching. This is real life.
Yeah, I mean, you said it would be unfair to Daniel Jones. I think you'd be selling yourself short if you're going to use this one game as a determining factor for anything at all. Yeah. But I guess if some of the old bugaboos of Daniel Jones resurface, like a fumble. Like, I mean, to be fair, the last Washington game, they scored very quickly off of a Daniel Jones fumble. Now, it wasn't exactly a fumble in the pocket that he got strip sacked. He was called on a run and lost. I mean, not that those
happen, though.
Exactly. The bigger problem with Daniel Jones wasn't losing the ball on a run. It was having no pocket awareness and getting stripped. Those are different things. But I guess if he's going to get strip sacked 3 times in this game, then maybe you can take that into context of like, maybe this is not the guy. In the biggest moment, he went back to his old flaws. But I don't see that happening, mainly because it hasn't really been a problem for like 2 years at least.
Yeah. It's a non-story until he has that random interception and people, they grab their notes and like, oh yeah, Daniel Jones, turnover machine. And they go back and they recycle all this stuff. But it's not, even before you go into a game, I haven't read many previews about, today Daniel Jones is playing. Remember, he fumbles a lot and intercepts a lot. It's not really part of the narrative anymore until he does it.
Yeah, and he hasn't really even thrown that many interceptions either. Like,
no. I mean, it's to the contrarian side of that is like, he's not throwing as many risky passes. I mean, a lot of stuff is safer, but he's executing.
I mean, I would say that he is throwing less risky called passes. I guess in the broken play scenarios and 2-minute drills, he is kind of just going off script, and he is throwing some tight window passes. I mean, I don't remember which game, but he threw an absolute bullet to Richie James in between like 3 defenders in the middle of the field.
That was the play when where we were sitting, we were like directly behind the throw, and you could see the trajectory of the ball going, and it was perfect.
And then also even the touchdown pass to Isaiah Hodgins last week, just kind of extending that play. Isaiah Hodgins, I don't even know if he was part of the progression on that play. I guess he's probably option number 3 in that scenario. I guess you go Bellinger first, run it in second, and then. But
these are scenarios you're talking about that
they're not called.
No, I think are things that the front office is looking at and evaluating. It's like making those tight throws,
Sure.
And making the progression maybe not in the natural progression, finding somebody. Those are the growth things we're looking for in a quarterback. Not, well, he's not throwing picks because of it. It's like, let's look at the growth from now even to the beginning of this year.
You're absolutely right. And like you said, this game is just one data point in a set of 17 this year and then 5 years before it. And frankly, the years prior, this 1 year alone is the first time he's had a coaching staff that was kind of, I don't know. I guess under Pat Shurmur, he was allowed to kind of sling it as he saw fit, but he was much younger then, etc. So
and more weapons then too to be able to sling it.
Well, that's the other thing is that are they really going to use this game to determine the future when he's got Darius Slayton, Richie James, and Isaiah Hodgins as his top 3 receivers? I mean. What kind of unfair shit is that?
There's going to be bigger questions about off-season roster rebuilding and allocation of funds that may not necessarily mean how Daniel Jones played. If they're just deciding that they want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and they want to have as much money as possible going forward, he might be a budget casualty. But I don't think it's because of particular play in this game specifically.
And you mentioned that that drop pass by Slayton that probably would have won the game 2 weeks ago, and this was a game that they should have won, they could have won, and they kind of let slip away. We had the Daniel Jones fumble in the very first drive of the game. Darius Slayton dropped the pass. John Feliciano with the taunting penalty that set back a drive that was in enemy territory. And then 2 missed tackles that allowed for the only 2 touchdowns that Washington was able to score. All sorts of little mistakes here and there, but
I have it in my notes. The question to ask you is, overall, who was the better team in that game? Who looked like they were just better?
I guess Washington, with the exception of the quarterback. Like, if it weren't for Heineke just throwing ducks, because if you look back, the defensive line for the Giants 8 during that game. I think I had it in my notes that they had like 10 quarterback hits between them and like 6 sacks or something, maybe 4 sacks. Fuck, I keep doing that. I don't know. Would you agree with that? That the Commanders just looked more steady throughout that game?
I think from a 1 to 22, players who played, I think they were slightly better than the Giants. But I think if that game was played 10 times, I think it could be a 5-5.
Okay.
So, yeah.
The bummer of this is that was the game that they should have won. That they needed to win.
They needed to win. Yeah.
They were significantly. Washington was significantly less healthy during that game. And this doesn't really have anything to do with the bye week, just simply the fact that there were guys that were almost ready to play that couldn't play that game, and guys that were maybe just coming back from injury, whatever. And now there's I mean, do you think right now Chase Young is kind of a limited participant? They're being cagey with his availability. Do you think there's a universe in which Chase Young does not play on Sunday night?
Sure.
Really?
I think it's possible. I mean, as a universe, I wouldn't book my my SpaceX ticket to go to that universe, but I think there is a universe where he's not playing.
If he's
I think the much more likely scenario is he's going to play a handful of snaps at most. I think that's the most likely scenario.
All right. I don't see him being ruled out for this game.
Yeah. I would say I see it could be possible, but I'd say most likely he is playing. And again, I don't think you're going to see him, 50, 60, 70% of the snaps. I think it's going to be limited.
And, I'm not overly worried about Chase Young. Andrew Thomas doesn't seem to have much of an issue with him. He does move around, though, and Evan Neal might have some issues with him. Regardless, a first-round pick playing versus not playing, it's obvious. It's not even first-round, but it's top 5 pick playing versus not playing. I mean, it is indisputable that it's way better to be playing against a team that doesn't have that guy playing. So 2 weeks ago was the game to win. This now is a much tougher game to win. And based on what we saw 2 weeks ago, it's kind of difficult to imagine a domination at this point.
Well, I was actually kind of thinking about what you said on Monday's show about, confidence and broken spirit and things like that. And the more I thought about it, the more it kind of makes sense. I mean, this roster is still pretty young, correct?
Oh, yes, quite.
This roster, how much playoff experience does this roster have? How much big game experience does this roster have?
Adoree Jackson he's not playing, but
yeah,
not much.
So, I mean, this is a roster, and again, this is a roster in transition. We expect to see a lot of turnover between now and even next year. Never mind, 2-3 years when we really expect this team to be, at the peak of the rebuild process. They're not used to the ups and downs of a 17-game season and the swings, and because this team had some pretty high highs, and definitely outkicked our coverage early in the year. And I think that starting with those losses, that Washington win where they just, I'm not going to be super harsh and call it losers lose because they're not a losers lose team, but it's a tough game to lose, and then follow it up by getting getting boat raced by a division rival. I'd be very interested what the psyche of this team is going to be going into it.
So,
and I'm also at the same token not going to blame this coaching staff to say you didn't get this team up and prepared for it.
No. So we actually had a lengthy, like an hour-long discussion after recording last episode.
We should have just kept it.
We should have, because it was, I don't know, it was fruitful conversation.
It was fascinating.
Yeah. But one of the things that we were saying is that the biggest bitch of the tie against Washington is that it was just kind of hanging out there. And more than anything, this team just needed a win for their confidence. They've been on a slide. They just needed to get, we were just talking about a slump buster. You just need something. It doesn't have to be pretty. It can be by 1 point, because it doesn't matter. You know, at the end of the day, when you wake up the next morning, you remember winning. Not that it was not so great or whatever, or that it was by 1 point or 50 points. What you remember is winning.
They didn't wake up and say, well, we have the tiebreaker against Seattle. It's shit, we didn't win.
Yes, and quite frankly, I mean, we went through the list of things that sucked about it being a tie, and the number one thing is that it didn't feel like anything different than a loss, and the players themselves said that. Jihad Ward said that they take it like a loss. Daniel Bellinger said that it feels like a loss to him. They were down on themselves after that game.
This may be an obvious question for you, Grump, but that's the attitude we want from our players, right? That it felt like a loss as opposed to a win.
In a certain scenario, yes, you don't want them to be content with a tie, because that's, lame. But I think in the context of where they were in their slide, and like you said, they're a young team, they could have used the confidence boost of a W.
Oh, I agree.
It didn't matter if it happened in overtime or not.
Right.
It just needed to be a win, and it didn't happen. And I think that led directly to the absolute pegging they received against Philadelphia. Yeah, you like that?
I was trying to be nice with the boat racing, but
I don't worry. Hey, if I had to stand in the rain for that game, then they're going to get the full lashing. So,
the full GIMP treatment.
So with this game, I think it's time to unleash Daniel Jones as a weapon, right? It's time to use the full gamut of his abilities. It's time to bring him out on zone reads, let him run around the edges, let him throw the ball, let him take chances. You know, if Darius Slayton drops a wide open 45-yard pass, so be it. At least you took the chance. And I don't mean the willy-nilly chances where right after that throw you go downfield on the other side of the field into tight coverage and just throw the long ball for the sake of the long ball. I mean, take your shots, make them think twice. And I think that it's time they start using Saquon Barkley less as a traditional running back and more as a receiving weapon. And I mean lining him up in the slot. And I don't mean lining him up in the slot and motioning him into the backfield. If you need somebody in there for extra protection, then leave Gary Brightwell in there and put Saquon Barkley in the slot. They don't have a lot of receivers. Right now, it's Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, and Richie James, who is technically, I think, on his way out of the concussion protocol.
And those are the only three guys, the only three wide receivers who caught passes against him 2 weeks ago. And remember, in that game 2 weeks ago, Daniel Jones was effective running the ball. He had 71 yards. You know, he had 5.9 yards a carry. So it's not like that wasn't the, he didn't run, couldn't run game. That was one of the ones he could. And I think we just kind of build on that even more. He was our leading rusher in that game.
So, to my point about Barkley here, Saquon's numbers in the last 6 weeks have been not just not special, they haven't even been good. I mean, really not good. Last week, under 30 yards. The week before that, which was against Washington, was the best game that he had in the 6-game slide, and he still had under 70 yards.
Yeah.
Dallas game, he had 40 yards. The Detroit game, 22 yards. The only game that really stuck out was the Houston game, where he carried the ball for 35 tries and he got 152 yards, again against the worst team in the NFL.
Well, the other thing too about him is, even though like the yards per carry are very low, he hasn't really broken like a 40-yarder in quite a while, it feels like. Like, when was the last time he's had a truly long run that's like flipped the field at least?
Green Bay, he had a 40-yarder.
That's a long time ago.
It was October 9th.
And it seemed like early in the season, like once a game, you know, the Tennessee game, he had a big one, didn't he, right after halftime?
70 yards.
Yeah, all these things. And like, we haven't seen, you know, you can live a little bit with a low yards per carry if there's that potential for one or two, you know, either field flipping runs or straight up taking it to the house ones. And we just haven't seen it in, you know, a long time.
Yeah, like I said, he hasn't been special. He hasn't even been good. And we've seen it week after week now. His runs up the middle are producing nothing at all.
Yeah.
And I just think it's high time we stop trying to beat a dead horse. I'm not trying to say that Gary Brightwell is a better running back, but certain running backs have certain skill sets that are more conducive than others. And between the tackles, Gary Brightwell just puts his head down and goes forward. And it doesn't always work, but when it does work, it works for more yards than when Barkley does it.
And this is something we go back to last year, even saying with the old coaching staff, it's, the weakest part of your line. Why are you using your running back, who that's not his best skill set, as just a battering ram to try? And it's just bad fit all around.
When the Giants drafted Saquon Barkley, I wasn't thrilled about it, but I did say that it's not exactly like drafting a running back in the first round. I mean, really what you're doing is you're drafting an offensive weapon. But every coaching staff that's come in has tried to build an offense around their running back. And they just keep using Saquon as a running back, not as an offensive weapon.
I mean, try to compare him to Christian McCaffrey. Look at all the ways they use Christian McCaffrey. And compare that to what Saquon Barkley is.
Christian McCaffrey's just better.
I know he's better, but they also utilize him in so many different ways too.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I think also some of it is that Barkley just doesn't have great hands. I mean, maybe that's not the right way to say it. I think he probably has decent hands, but
also, we were trying to throw little things in the flat to him, get him out in space. We're not asking him to make acrobatic catches or wide receiver-esque catches. We're asking basic things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe it's time we don't ask him to do that. I mean, some of his best plays are things like wheel routes and things like that get him downfield and shit.
Yeah.
I think it's time that
hands too.
I just think it's time, but I think in those scenarios when you have him downfield, he's catching the ball more in front of him. Rather, when you get him out in the flat, you kind of have to twist your body around. You know what I'm saying?
Catch it like this.
You kind of almost have to turn around and then whip back around. And I think
and hands are, I don't know if you can see my hands, but it's not like catching like this. It's like a catcher almost.
I don't think that it's really conducive to getting him in space. It's really just giving him an easy catch, I guess. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I think by the time he turns all the way around and shit, it's just used too much time. I don't know. I like the idea of using him in more threatening ways than just routes out to the flat. You know what I mean? There's nothing less threatening to me than that shit.
I mean, again, this game also should not be kind of the trial of Saquon Barkley either, but it's just the more and more we talk about Barkley and the more and more evidence we see, the more data points of each game going forward. I mean, the $1 million question for me is not, are we re-signing Jones? It's, are we re-signing Barkley? Are we tagging him? I would agree with that.
And I think that they've demonstrated that Barkley is... I think they've demonstrated that Barkley is a dynamic weapon in space, but overall is not really a down-in, down-out threat the way that, say, Derrick Henry is or Christian McCaffrey is, right?
Can I make another bold prediction?
You may.
I think this coaching staff is out on Barkley.
I agree. I think that they've tried to work him into every single game plan, and it hasn't really worked. And I also don't buy this bullshit that he got hurt in the Green Bay game, and that's affecting him now. I don't buy it. I'm not saying he didn't get hurt in the Green Bay game, but that being the cause for the slide, it just doesn't make any sense. The Green Bay game was October 9th. The Jacksonville game was 2 weeks after that. He ran for 110 yards.
Well, the Houston game was after that.
November 13th was the Houston game.
Yeah, I'm not buying that.
I don't buy it. Convenient. I will say, though, I mean, he seems a lot more confident this week in interviews and stuff, and felt like he had a good week of practice. To me, that I agree. Means very little, but if there is something nagging him that is let go finally, that's good news.
The only thing I could say about that, which I don't care what players say, but sounding more confident after last week's,
debacle,
as a smart man once said, at least if you're talking this game, at least you're giving that outward projection that that's in the rearview mirror when looking forward.
That's
Whether
true.
that means he
Yeah.
actually produces on the field might be a second thing, but it starts with attitude. And we all know with football, the game is played, in between the ears with, passion and emotion and, willing to win as much as it is physically.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Mhm.
I think there's a chance that Barkley. I mean, like I said, in the 6-game slide, the best game he had that didn't include a game in which he ran the ball 35 times was against Washington. I think that there's yards to be had for him there. There's matchups to exploit for him there. In this game, I think the biggest thing is actually going to be on defense because
I completely agree.
I mean, as much as I think the offense is hampered. I mean, there's just only so much you can ask of this beat up offensive line, this sorry group of wide receivers. But defensively, like I said, there's 14 points they put on the board by simply not being able to tackle.
Right.
And, they dominated the line of scrimmage on defense. They beat the shit out of Taylor Heineke. He was throwing lofty little lollipops up there that just weren't getting picked off and stupid stuff like
I
that.
can remember the one specific play when I even said that exact term to him. Like look at that lollipop.
Yeah, it's how he throws all the time. Anytime it's got to go downfield, he really does throw mortars out there. I mean, it's just got such an arc on it that a safety worth his salt would come over and make that pick, or at least make a play on the ball. Really, the defense did everything except finish plays.
Yep.
That game.
And I think those kind of feel like one-off, just unfortunate events as opposed to chronic issues. Like I wouldn't count on that happening again and again if we play. Like remember before I said they played 10 times. I don't think I'd have a scenario where 8 of those 10 times we have 2 missed tackles that lead to 14 points in each game. That's an outlier.
I think that I'm less worried about the deep ball plays and things like that because I think that if Taylor Heineke has to be back in the pocket for 3 seconds or more, I think that pressure will get there for the most part.
Agreed.
And I think that any ball he has to throw downfield is going to have some air underneath it. I'm more worried about the quick hitter plays that play more to his strength and against our linebackers that can't cover for shit. So if the Giants can play tighter coverage for the first 2 seconds after snap, you're allowed to put your hands on receivers right at the line of scrimmage and within 5 yards. So do it. Mug them, maul them,
And play
get them
even
off
tighter
their
at the
route.
line of scrimmage. Don't
Yeah.
give any cushion at all.
Yeah, push them around, shove them, get them off their get the timing screwed up, get the routes all messed up. Do whatever it takes in those first 2 seconds because the longer he has to sit in the pocket, the further downfield he has to throw. All plays into the strengths of the Giants, not into the Commanders.
Right.
Because I don't really have any faith that the linebackers are suddenly going to get better in coverage over the middle.
Nope.
Jalen Smith was not signed here to be a coverage linebacker. Micah McFadden wasn't really drafted to be a coverage linebacker. That's not really what we
And
have
it really
right
showed last week too.
now. Oh, yeah. The other thing is to continue hammering down on that running game because they're going to lean on it. And Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, both guys have been hurt all year. They've been healthier during some games than others, but if they're able to run the ball for 4 yards per attempt, it's going to be a long, long game where we're going to see those 14-play, 8-minute drives that we saw last week the whole time.
Guess what they averaged 2 weeks ago when they played us?
4 yards a carry?
4.6.
Yeah. That can't happen. Now, Leonard Williams is limited this week, continuing that neck injury. Do you feel any better about him playing this week?
Limited. Again, he might be out. It's kind of the same thing about what's his name, where I think he'll be out there for maybe, an X amount of snaps, but not, the majority of plays. And again, any play he can be in there changes that defensive line quite a bit. So, I'm hoping he's out there for some plays.
Yeah. I I do feel good about this defensive line group. I think that over the last couple weeks, we've seen Azeez Ojulari and Kayvon Thibodeau start to form and it's really been the only 2 weeks they've played together.
Let me ask you a quick question going back to limited for a minute. Have you gotten enough sense from this coaching staff of limited players? Do you get the sense that the staff uses limited, like they can't go, we can only use them a little bit in practice, or we are saving them for game scenarios by limiting them? Or can't really tell?
I can't tell. I mean, like anytime that the injury designation is entirely due to rest, they have to list it as rest.
Right.
That's obviously not the case or what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know that there's any way to know either.
I guess we could do an analysis, like maybe after the season or something, about how many people were limited versus how many of those guys that were limited played versus didn't play.
Well, I would say that it's far more likely for a guy like Leo to be limited as a way of saving him for the game because he's a veteran.
Yeah.
Right, who needs a lot less practice than, say, Daniel Bellinger, who's an integral part of the offense and a rookie.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I definitely think it's possible. I don't think that's a silly question. I just don't know that there's any way to possibly know, especially with, like, media's limited access to practices and things like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know, man. To me, I don't really care about the math going forward. To me, this is the only game left on the schedule, right? I mean, this is the game that I'm pulling out all the stops for because making the playoffs is a big deal. It's a big deal for this coaching staff. It's a big deal for the young players.
Is the goal. I mean, that's honestly, in this year, with this scenario, with this beginning of the rebuild, blah, 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 the goal, is to make it. That's it. Don't worry about what happens, like what matchup will be. I don't care.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter if they're one and done.
Yeah.
I think going to the playoffs is a big deal for this organization. It's a big deal for the fan base. It's a big deal for these coaches. Their first time. This isn't Brian Daboll's first year in New York. It's his first year as a head coach.
Yeah.
It's Mike Kafka's first year as an offensive coordinator. It has nothing to do with their first year here. It's their first year ever. It's a big deal, and it's valuable experience for these guys who need it. Remember, we look up to these guys because they're, whatever, good at their job, adults, have had success in other roles prior.
I honestly think it's a bigger deal inside the building than the people sitting in the seats. Because I think, the fans are the fans, and the fans are either going to always have overinflated expectations and never be happy or whatever. But I think to really build a winning culture in that building and with those players and get 100% buy-in from this coaching staff, making the playoffs really says something. It means something. There's only, was it 16 teams make it out of 30?
14, I think, right?
14
Isn't it seven seeds in each conference?
Yeah, 14 make it out of 34. Every game is a primetime game because they don't have multiple playoff games going on at the same time, so everybody's watching. It is a major deal. And I think, if you're realistic and you're even on the Giants, this is not a Super Bowl team, but you're playing for something important. You're playing for an extra week of playing. And it's very, very important. And you just don't want even if it's a perception of, well, this team underachieved or choked or disappointed or failed because they didn't make the playoffs. Why even bother with that? Just win this game, do what you got to do in the next couple of games, finish it off against Indy, and then let's get ready. That's how I feel. But let me ask you, Grump, and I don't know if this is the right time to have this conversation, but do you feel that this season would be either a disappointment or a failure if they don't make the playoffs?
For me?
For you personally?
It would be a disappointment, but it wouldn't be a failure. I think they've achieved far more than I expected already in this year, but it would be a disappointment because I think that they let the Washington game slip away 2 weeks ago. I think that they also kind of let the Detroit game get out of hand. I think
Mhm.
that I personally believe that there was some punch pulling that happened at a certain point when they kind of were protecting their lead in the standings more than they were being aggressive anymore. And to me, that's football. That's inexcusable. It's not baseball. It's not. There's not enough games for you to screw around. And I think also, even in the micro version of that, the in-game version where you have the lead and you start changing. Don't change what worked. This worked against this team because that's their weakness, and you've used it against them.
Right.
Don't just
Philly,
protect your lead.
look no further than Philly last week. They knew what our weaknesses were, and they exploited it the entire game.
Oh yeah.
There was no letting off the gas by,
Nope.
they knew who to target. They did it all friggin' game.
Yeah, and so for me, it would be a disappointment because I think they, as much as you can have it in the bag without having played the game yet, they had it in the bag. They just needed to keep being themselves, and they kind of stopped. Um, and for that reason, it would be a disappointment. But I think removing myself from that when the Super Bowl is over and it's time to rebuild, I think I look back on the season with bright eyes and with good memories and think that there is plenty there for this to build off of for the future. So
Yeah,
it would be a disappointment, but it would really only linger for the last month or so, and then I'd move on.
I think yeah, I've been trying to find the right way to articulate this, but I think I just figured it out. It'd be disappointing that we had one goal for this team, and then there were other goals as well. And it was disappointing that we make a higher goal of making the playoffs, but overall, this team, the way they fought in the beginning of the season, the way they fought through adversity, and just I think there's more pieces here to build off of than I originally thought at the beginning of the season. So that to me doesn't make this season a disappointment.
Yeah, and I also think that there is enough brains in this in the coaching staff to make the most out of weak points. I mean, the fact that Isaiah Hodgins is catching touchdown passes says something to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I feel good about the fact that we can coach around a weaker roster. You know what I mean? So it's like we can gain success without having the perfect roster.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think if anybody thinks that the season's a failure because they quote unquote choked, I think has to reassess and reevaluate, you know, what was realistic this year? What were your goals going into this year? And even what your goals were at, week 6, you know, I don't think this is a failure season by any stretch.
Give me your prediction, Crank.
Well, you know, when you can point out very specific plays for reasons why you lost, that means overall it was a pretty close game between two teams that, I had to ask you and you had to think about it for a couple seconds to say what team looked better. And I think this is close enough where, you know, like I said a little earlier, that I don't think we're going to have two missed tackles result, two plays like that were kind of fluky, resulting in 14 direct points. So, having said all of that, I still like Daniel Jones more than I do Heineke. I think this is Daniel Jones. Again, he's not on trial, but I think this is an opportunity for Daniel Jones to really take this job and say, it is mine. And even with the lack of weapons he has, the lack of a pass protection that he has, the very uncertainty of the running game, how bad we are with stopping the run. They're wanting to run the ball a lot. They're going to run a lot. Um, I think we're still going to squeeze this out because again, I am not sold that Washington is that great either. And they were off for a week, maybe a tiny bit of rust from not playing. I know they got a little healthy because of that week, and I know you're scouting the same team twice in a row, but I am going to put a little blind faith in the Giants squeezing this out, and I am going to go 24-21.
Um, when we saw Bobby at the tailgate, what game was that? I don't remember.
It's 2 weeks ago.
Was that the Washington game?
Yeah.
He said something. I don't know if you were there, if he was just talking to me, but I just remember him saying, like, can we stop pretending like the bye week is an automatic advantage, that teams come out rusty from the bye week all the time? He's kind of right. That does happen almost as often as teams come out better. So it's kind of a flip of a coin. I think that there is a possibility of that. I think also I think that both of these teams have coaches that are good at looking at the film and adjusting. I think the Giants might have a slight advantage there. But more than anything, I kind of think that overall the Giants have a better altogether roster. And when all else is even, players being better is an advantage. It could be the deciding factor,
Yes.
you know. I still don't have confidence that this offense is going to score lots of points. They just don't have the horses. But I do think that the defense will buckle down. I do think that tackles will be made. I think that this defensive line is the defensive ends, I'll say, are getting more and more better. they're getting stronger as a team. Kayvon Thibodeau and Aziz Ojolari. And I think that the defense shuts things down a lot more. I think the Giants pull this one out 20-16.
Clip this. I think we're going to have a defensive score.
Okay. Cranky fan thinks in
I-
what way? Sack, fumble, interception?
I was just going to say that. I was, there was a stretch in that game, third quarter, where we were putting considerable pressure, as the game was wearing on and their offensive line was getting maybe worn down a little bit, that we were getting more and more pressure on Heineke. And I think we are going to get to him. And I think, it's going to cause – you even made the comment that you were upset about Thibodeau, that it had that sack, in overtime, that it should have been if he swung his arm around, it could have been that he could have forced a fumble.
I said that in the moment. Upon rewatching, I was wrong 100%.
Yeah.
But it was a huge chance. I mean, he even said it himself. Kayvon
Right.
Thibodeau said in the interview afterwards that he got up expecting him to drop the ball, but he was just able to hold on to it.
In the heat of the moment, I kind of disagree with you, but looking at the tape, yeah. But the point is, he was close enough that a strip sack could have very easily happened, and I could see again as this game kind of wears on and it becomes a field position game, something like that absolutely does happen, and we score off of it. So those 24 points, while the offense may have struggled times, getting yardage and scoring, I think we can score on the benefit of a defensive score. I'll go ahead and call my shot.
I respect it, and I hope for it. So we're both predicting a win here, which pretty much almost guarantees the Giants going to the playoffs. It would be this win, and the win against Indianapolis would just about seal it. I think that would put us at like a 99%
And we're getting some
chance.
help as we go around the league of games that are relevant to us. Seattle, as we record this on Thursday night, is
They got their
losing.
ass kicked.
Yeah, they're getting their asses kicked. Let's go around the division, I guess. Get your schedule handy.
Well, I know what Dallas and Philly are doing this week. They have, I mean, every other team in the division has an easier schedule than the Giants right now. Hang on one second.
Of course.
This week, Dallas is at Jacksonville. Do you want to make a prediction on that while I pull up the rest of the schedule?
I think Jacksonville's going to win.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Well, I think Jacksonville's been playing better as of late, and I spent the last couple of weeks on this show saying, I fear Dallas more than I do Washington, and then they barely, struggled to get out of that Houston game with a win.
Dallas more than Washington or Dallas more than Philadelphia?
Okay, here's a breaking story. I fear Dallas more than Washington. But I also, for the last 2 weeks, saying I fear Dallas more than Philly. That may be true in an individual game, an individual matchup against us, but I think right now, Jacksonville has a lot to play for also. They still have a shot to make the playoffs, as well. I just got this weird feeling the way that this weird year of the NFL I think I just have this gut feeling that Jacksonville's going to come away with a win.
Philadelphia is playing Chicago.
I can't be that confident on that one. I think that Philly wins that one huge.
Yeah. As for the rest of the year, Philly goes Chicago, then Dallas, then New Orleans, then Giants. The Cowboys go Jaguars, Eagles, Titans, Commanders. And the
It's
Commanders.
not easy.
No, it's not. I mean,
That's where the tie also kills because, okay, we're looking at the backside like we're trying to get into the playoffs, but, the positive says, if we have beaten Washington, you still realistically have a chance to catch Dallas. But, that tie basically kills that
Yeah.
and any hope for that.
Washington has probably the toughest outside of... Actually, Washington might have the toughest remaining schedule. They have us, then the Niners, then the Browns, and then the Cowboys. That's a tough schedule. Though I can much sooner see Mike McCarthy resting his starters in the last week of the year than I can Nick Sirianni.
Totally.
So that last game may be a nothing for...
And then, what time does the clock strike midnight on Brock Purdy if you're playing San Francisco? I mean, I'm watching this game tonight, and they, that offense is so fun to watch. And now, now that Samuel is out, what's in the tight ends back in the mix again, and
well, who says the clock does run out on Brock Purdy?
That's kind of $1 million question if you're 49er.
I mean, I'm being serious. He's a rookie, so it's not like what am I trying to think of? It's not like oh man, it's not like Brian Hoyer or Ryan Fitzpatrick or all these guys that repeatedly come in, they play well, and then they fall apart or whatever. This is a rookie,
right? And I guess
and not for nothing, he was good in college.
I guess what's the precedence of a rookie coming in at a Super Bowl level team and keeping the ball rolling?
Well, I don't know about Super Bowl level, but I think you can look at Kirk Cousins. Drafted in the 3rd round, the same year as Robert Griffin, clearly was not their first option at quarterback, and now is the quarterback of the number 2 seed in the NFC.
Oh, no, yeah, but we're also talking years down the road.
I'm just saying, what I'm saying is that all the time we spend a lot of time evaluating quarterbacks, and it can be the guy that you wouldn't expect sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I didn't mean that in the context of the clock striking midnight on him as a quarterback in this league. I meant in this present circumstance as being the quarterback on, probably the second best team in the league.
Well, I mean, obviously this is a ridiculous thing to say, but not for nothing, but Tom Brady only got a shot because Drew Bledsoe got hurt.
Right.
Would any of us know Tom Brady's name if Drew Bledsoe didn't get hurt?
I remember in Michigan, but it was one of those guys like if you're watching on a Saturday, oh yeah, he's the quarterback, that guy.
That's what I'm saying. Brock Purdy was in the Big Ten, right?
But was he a rookie that year?
I
took over for Bledsoe?
thought so. I'm gonna double check that though.
Yeah.
Did you have any?
And not only was he a rookie, Purdy, he was the 3rd string quarterback for.
Yeah, it's true.
He was in the off season. He wasn't prepped at all, even to be the backup.
Yeah, that's true too.
I mean, I think it's fascinating, and if the Giants are out, obviously because of the cranky wife, I'll have some sort of rooting interest for the 49ers, but yeah, I just don't know. I mean, I'm not. That's what I mean. That whole comment was that's not about him as an NFL quarterback. It's just in this present circumstance, can he play at a level that is required for this team to make a serious Super Bowl run? Because I think before Garoppolo got hurt, this was I think the team that was had the only real shot of beating Philly and going to the Super Bowl.
Right. Well, I mean, in the context of the Commanders having to face them next week, I wouldn't say that the fact that it's Brock Purdy, I don't think that the clock will strike midnight that quickly. Also, Tom Brady was in his second season at that point.
Okay.
But,
Cool.
Close enough, I guess, right?
Oh, sure.
Any final thoughts?
Well, like I said, it is playoff week here on the Just Giants podcast. I am really happy to be in this situation. I'm treating this like this game was in mid-January. I think we're gonna pull this out. I really do. This Washington team, we spent the first third of the season when we were doing our previews, us saying Washington sucks, and they started winning some games, but I don't think this team is that great. I think it's certainly beatable. There's gonna be a lot of Giant fans down there. I just read something. I read some article that just said tickets on the secondary market are not very expensive, so I think you'll see a lot of Giant fans. All the ones who made money on their Eagle tickets have extra money to spend. Maybe jump on Amtrak and go down there. You cheap Giant fans. No, I feel good, and it's this is why we're fans for games like Sunday.
Yeah, look, I can't be upset about a must-win game in Week 15 in a winnable situation.
Yeah,
it's ideal, actually.
When we spent all off-season thinking about 2023 and 2024 and stuff like that. So,
I mean, only 2 teams in each conference really are ever not in a must-win situation at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So to not be one of those 2 teams is not disappointing. To be one of the teams fighting for a playoff spot is not disappointing at all. So...
is this the 1-year anniversary of the kneeling on third down?
Oh, I don't know. Boy, those memories are long buried.
They're long buried, and I don't mean to...
You're probably right. Yeah. No, I think it was a little later.
Was it in January? But, okay, so if it was 52 weeks away or 51 weeks away, look at the progress that this team has made in 51 or 52 weeks. Where we were as a collective fan base ready to, Thelma and Louise ourselves off the side of a cliff, one of the lowest points you can be as a Giant fan, to talking about making the playoffs and not backing into the playoffs, like making the playoffs, because, look at the other teams that are fighting for it. So this is good. This is fun. Treat it as fun. Don't be super fucking pissed if we lose this game and think, woe is us, we suck, same old Giants. That's not the case.
I mean, I'm going to be pissed in the moment.
I'll be pissed. Oh yeah, I'm gonna be pissed and upset, but there's being pissed and upset that we didn't win to get to the playoffs. And again, the season's not over if we lose this game, but there's piss by underachieving and piss by just not winning. And keep it in the second column as opposed to the first one.
All right, that's going to do it for us. So I will be watching from home, 8:20 or whenever it starts on Sunday night. And we will be with you Tuesday morning, as usual.
I'll be somewhere in Manhattan watching it at a bar. So if anybody wants to watch with me, hit me up on the Twitter machine at the Cranky Fan, and I will love to watch with you. So let me know.
Can't watch with me. I'm staying home because I don't feel good. So, but you can tweet at me during the game, and I'll give you my real-time thoughts at @football_grump. And as always, our show will be bright and early Tuesday morning. Our reaction to the win, right?
We'll be making our plans to go to either San Francisco or Tampa.
There is a 0 shot we're playing in Tampa.
There's a 0 shot?
We would have to be the 5th seed.
We have to be the 5th seed.
Which is not happening. Because that would mean we'd have to outshoot Dallas.
That ain't happening.
That's not happening.
Fine.
It's more likely that we're playing San Francisco or Minnesota. The 2nd or 3rd seed. Either way, it doesn't matter. We're playing in a playoff game.
Amen.
So we will see you all Tuesday morning after a Giants win, and we will be high-fiving all of you at that time. Until then, go Giants.